Hi, my name's Tony Morbin. I'm Editor-in-Chief at SC Magazine. With me today, we've got Greg Day, the CTO of FireEye, following the publication of their latest Advanced Threat Report Europe, just came out yesterday. Greg, tell me the main conclusions of the report, and also why a European report?
Well, we ran a global report about a month ago, and it's great to really see what's changing in the world en masse, and I think the things that we'd expect. We're seeing a far more focus on attacks that were very personalized, and interestingly we saw a couple of things. For example, the most targeted by volume wasn't what most people would expect, which is government. It was actually education, finance, high tech. But government is still where the innovation is.
I mean, that is a surprise. Now, is that in globally, or is that in Europe too?
So that was the global view, and I think then the interesting part is Europe. We're at a slightly different level of maturity of attacker in many ways, which is we're definitely seeing a rise in very focused attacks, but not quite the same level of percentage that we see in the US. And actually, even when I look at in Europe, what I could certainly see in there was countries like UK, France, Germany. We saw more personalized attacks than in emerging parts of Europe, so Poland and some of the Eastern European countries.
I mean, surely, to a large extent, we're talking about a lot of the same attackers, Russian speakers, or do they do a different type of attack for different territories?
Well, and I think, and this is probably where there is some division. I think the big attacks that are aimed at big global entities are almost what really stand out in that global report. But when I think of, for example, the UK, we're driven by SMEs. If I think of Germany, where it's very much driven by industry and manufacturing, actually we saw some different leaders in that targeted space. Certainly up there in Europe was two key industries for me, which was the pharmaceutical industry. We have a lot of pharmaceuticals in Europe, and actually manufacturing and automotive. So we saw the attackers honing in on where there is that valuable IP in Europe and the industry space, where they can get most value from that.
Does that mean that the conclusions, both in terms of the conclusions of the report, but also in terms of the recommendations as to what people should be doing about it, are the recommendations different, and what are those recommendations?
So I think in the recommendations, almost the first part of that is always education and awareness. And I think in many ways, be it because of the legislation in the US, which actually is now coming to us with the Network Information Security Directive and changes to the data protection laws, the US is probably more aware of the problem, and the problem is it's probably a higher scale in the US, therefore they're a little ahead, I think, in terms of how they're responding to it. I think hopefully what will come out of this report is Europe becoming more aware that actually, for me, less is more. Where we see attacks that are en masse, then they're only going after generic things. And therefore, actually, the implications are less than, and we see either end of the scale here, either cyber criminals that have taken the time to focus in on the target, using the same old tools, but just be persistent, but if they've aimed just at me, then the thing they're trying to steal is probably the most valuable thing that I have, or through to that kind of lower small percentage that truly are real APTs. But I think the first bit of this is we have to realize what's valuable to us, and we have to become more focused with our security around the things that drive revenue for our business. I think the second bit is if we accept that attacks are getting more personal, we can't continue to rely on generic solutions. And if you think how the world has worked for 20 years, somebody found the threat, they passed it to the security industry, and we all wrote signatures to solve the problem. When the attack only hits me, and so what we were seeing is now 15-20% of the attacks in Europe hit purely one organization. If I don't find it, no one else will. So I have to be better, and I have to have the right tools and capabilities to do self-discovery in a timely fashion. And especially if I link back to, we just before this released our Mandiant M-Trends report. The mean time to discovery of compromise, 229 days. Now the good news, it's 14 days less than last year, but it's a massive window.
Still a long time on your network, certainly. In terms of advanced threats, are we talking, what percentage are we talking organised crime, and what percentage are actually state entities? And are the organised crime people also interested in IP or just after the money?
So I think the state entity is and there's different ways you can cut this down really in many ways. In terms of the volume of attacks is fairly low, and it's interesting because we look at the attacks from a volume perspective, then those industries we talked about, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, are up there at the top. If we look at the volume of true APT attacks, actually government and defence, even in Europe, is still at that high end. And so we see, less volume, but what we see there is far more ongoing evolution. How do I take my APT to the next level and the next level and the next level? And so you're going to see small volumes of those, but potentially very high impact. Whereas I think what we see across industry more is the cyber criminals taking the concepts of targeted and saying, rather than me taking £1, €1 from 10,000 people, actually if I focus in on one company, I can take €1 million or £1 million, and persistence that says whether I'm using poison ivy, shark, or any of these malware generation toolkits, and what I'll do is I'll do some reconnaissance, figure out how I'm going to get in the door, whether that's spear phishing or work with something like water holing, and I will keep knocking and knocking and knocking till I get in, because the return is high. So I think, the techniques in many ways are similar, but what is different is the capabilities behind it.
To sum up, what would you say is the one key thing that people should do to respond if they find that they have been the victim of an APT attack?
There's probably about 3 or 4 key bits that go into this. I think number one is you've got to have a response strategy. And from some of the polls I've done, I say less than 50% today of companies actually have a documented response strategy. Number two behind that is test it. And I look back 10 years ago, we all suddenly realized we needed backups. And what happened the following years? Every backup failed when it was needed, so now we test it regularly. We need to test that response strategy, and that's not just a technical process, it's a business process. I think number 3 for me is a key decision. Incident response is a very specialist skill. And so I think there's a key decision that says, do I want to do this myself? Am I going to build a computer emergency response team, have these highly skilled people, or actually do I just want to outsource the problem? Do I want to just have a service that I can call in when I need that will do that for me? And I think that's a really key decision, because this is a very sophisticated capability.
So you have to decide whether or not you do have the capabilities, or you're going to get somebody else to do it.
And you can hybrid between those two. You might say, tier 1 triage, I can do myself, decide if it's important or not. But when I get to that point of going, maybe they hit somewhere key, and I really want to kind of take this thing to pieces, then maybe I need a second level of eyes and ears, and also to help me actually do the attribution, help me really understand what they were trying to do and what their capability is.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching today. Greg's gone through the report, give you a bit of a taste and a feel for it. If you want to actually look at the report and download it yourself, we're going to have a link at SC Magazine online, www.scmagazineuk.com. Thanks very much.